Welcome, Mr. Jordan, to the podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jerron Jordan. I'm from Coolidge, Arizona originally. Born and raised from the Gila River Indian community on my father's side. And that's where I grew up and spent a lot of my years. And I'm also, on my mother's side, I'm half African-American.
Okay.
So, I spent a lot of time down in southern Arizona. That's where I went to school down in Coolidge High School alumni. Mm-hmm. And, working on the Gila River growing up with my grandmother's side a lot and spending a lot of time farming, chopping cotton, hard work.
Yeah.
And then I went to school, all my schooling years down there, and eventually graduated and went up to school at NAU. Pursued a degree in elementary education and had the opportunity out of college to go coach with a Hall of Famer, Don Petronovich. And that was a great experience, and which I later on, after many years working with the legend, had an opportunity to take over the girls program at Winslow High School. And that was a lot of fun. And we had a good run and did that for quite a few years. And then I decided that, I needed a little break, and I took some time off, took a couple years off, and then got a call from the junior high at the Winslow Junior High School inviting me. They needed a 7th grade coach, and it was an opportunity. I said, let me try it, and kind of went from there. And then, some other doors opened up in the high school, and that's kind of how I got back in the game. And now I'm coaching at the boys at Winslow High School. So,
wow, it's a journey, man.
Yeah. I think I remember when you coached the girls. What year was it? Was that 2010 or 11?
Yeah, I started in 2010.
2010. Okay. So I guess my question is, what was it like with Mr. Petronovich? I know he was a legend, and for a lot, I have some friends that graduate from Winslow, and they always talk about him and his legendary run as coach.
Right. Working with the legend Don Petronovich was the greatest experience because he's the all-time winningest girls coach, in the state. One of the top 5 in the nation, I think, unless that's been surpassed. But he taught me so much beyond the game of basketball. Just, a lot of people think that when you're a high school coach, it's just showing up and coaching these kids, but there's so much more to the job of, dealing with student achievement, discipline, teaching them life skills for the game of life, which, we want to see all our student athletes pursue something bigger after high school. And so it was just a really good experience. I was like a sponge, when I was his junior varsity coach for many years, I had an opportunity to take on some different jobs. I got offered some bigger positions, but, he was real straight up with me. He said, if you do right by me and you stay with me, the program will be yours when I'm done. And, I kind of saw that as an opportunity, and to learn as much as I could from the legend. And he just taught me a lot of things, that really helped me as a teacher too in the classroom, because I'm also a 5th grade teacher in Winslow. And so, I always say he's my second father, but just a really good man,
Yeah. I guess what are some of the, I guess when it comes to the coaching aspect, what are some of the things that, I guess you carry most on, or that you carry from him? Is it, preparing or building skills, or just, I guess in a sense, it's probably all the above, but right. I guess what are the big takeaways that you learn from him? And then secondly, what are some of the things that you've kind of changed and made your own?
Okay. The biggest thing that I probably learned from him was discipline, having that discipline both on the court and then, as a leader, kind of modeling things for your student athletes and then encouraging them, expecting a lot out of them as athletes, holding them accountable as students in the classroom, because at the end of the day, they have to be eligible in order to play. And so I tried to keep that discipline, and I'm trying to, keep bringing that. And I tried to mentor that on to my other coaches. And I'm a firm believer that as a coach, coaches coach coaches, and so that was probably the biggest thing that I try to focus on, and I'm focusing on now as a boys coach. I didn't really change too much. Obviously what he did was very, very effective, and there's nobody that, could ever be the legend. I didn't even come close to winning as many state championships as him. I won a lot of games, but, it's, and in fairness to me, it's a lot harder now too, because you have more prep schools, and you have the prep and charter. And so, when Don retired, that Seton Catholic was our biggest one. And now there's tons of prep schools, and, and they get a lot of the best, so, but, just that and the dedication, I one thing, that I've learned, and as you get out of your program, what you put in, and, and unfortunately a lot of times that means sacrificing vacations with your family. In my case, as a girls coach, my health took a personal turn, and, and then, as I come back as a boys coach, I got to do things a little bit differently, because it's just when you give everything to your job and your craft, that's what happens. But as far as changing anything, I didn't really change too much. Only thing I would say is, just having adjust a little bit to the modern game. The game's a little different than, when coach coached. It's gotten faster, and in those days you didn't have a lot of posts that could shoot the three, and now you got posts that can shoot the three and open and extend the offense, and also can handle the ball. You didn't see a lot of that in those days. And so,
when did you first start with Petronovich?
I started with Coach Petronovich in 2001, right out of
okay.
AU, yeah. So I was his JV coach for a lot of years, and you know what? I have no regrets, because I was like a sponge, and soaking up all the knowledge I could, and and I felt like, in those days, like looking at how the game has progressed. Some of my early JV teams were just as competitive as some of my early varsity teams, because this is, I'm talking before PowerPoints. And so we used to go a lot across state lines, and play a lot in New Mexico.
Yeah, Gallup.
So Gallup. I remember when we'd play Gallup on a Friday and Shiprock on a Saturday.
Wow.
And, those were bigger schools than us in Winslow. Yeah. And just the fan base, if you know anything about Shiprock and Gallup basketball, they pack them in, and having those opportunities, I think, prepared me for something bigger. And so going back to coaches, he was preparing me to be his successor.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to elaborate on that a little more. How much has it changed? Because one of the things that we discussed with other coaches and is the emphasis, or not necessarily the emphasis, but the evolution to shooting a lot more threes. And I think it certainly started from the top down. It started in the professional leagues, right? And it's slowly kind of migrated down to now. It seems like the mid-range jumper is falling out of favor, and everyone either shoots a three or they, going for a layup or something really close underneath the basket. How is that? How you've seen it change? How do you respond to that change?
It seems like kind of for about almost a half a decade, the post player kind of went away, and you have a lot of post players that want to play guard, but as with that being said, you have a lot of post players that can shoot, and now it's kind of, you're starting to see it come back a little bit, where they're getting a little bit more involved, where you're starting to see traditional post players post up. But, in order to, if you have that one or two kids that can take their game to the next level, they're looking for that, kid that can handle the ball and also hit the, deep jumper on the perimeter, because that really can extend the defense and put them in a tough situation. So, I just think you're dealing with kids are more athletic now. You have kids that are really athletic and kids that are runners going into basketball. So they have the endurance. They just need to change their conditioning, and you just have a lot better athletes than you had in the earlier days.
Seems like back then, at least for up here in northern Arizona, northeastern, I guess specifically, there wasn't really, everyone just did kind of what Mac's doing. They had, their teams that would play with during the summer. Now it seems like, especially, in the larger cities, individual players, they're doing the AAU, and for those who can afford it, they're getting personal trainers now. The one players that we always reference are the girls from the ones who won the copper tournament this past year.
Okay.
What was that? Do you remember the school's name? For like 3 weeks, I knew their name perfectly, and now now that it's been so far, I can't remember the names. Was it Phoenix Christian that won the Copper Girls state championship?
I believe it was. Yeah.
It was a Christian school.
Oh,
I don't think it was Phoenix Christian. Yeah, and they were together for 4 years, and I think they ended up runner up for a couple years, but they were playing a lot of high level AAU basketball.
But they interviewed one of the girls at the very end after they had won, and she thanked her personal trainer that she had her. I'm not sure how long, but it sounded like that she's been working with that person for a while.
Right.
And what I gathered from that is, for the longest time, the North teams sort of had the luxury of playing res style ball, right? But from what Coach Perkins told me, or told Mac and I, a lot of the Southern schools, especially Phoenix area, they're starting to pick up on that. And as well as the league, whether it's, I'm not saying the WNBA plays res ball, but they're kind of starting to open up and shooting a lot more threes. So it seems like the schools down south, they're starting to figure out how to play, and we're talking girls basketball specifically. They're starting to figure out how to play and adapt to more of a run and gun style offense. And with the addition of personal trainers, possibly better nutrition, I've kind of been starting, and I think, I don't have any proof of this, this is more anecdotal, but I'm starting to think that these schools are starting to, these players from south of here are starting to figure it out, and they're going to be more challenging in the future.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that.
I agree with you. Yeah, they've adjusted their game, and and I think what really helps them is a lot of their athletes and their fan base going to watch Nabby, because it's in the Valley when you get to those later rounds, and they see that style. Having grown up in that conference, as a athlete, we knew on the boys' side it was going to be a team out of northern or northeastern Arizona that always brought home the trophy. But yeah, a lot of people have adjusted their game, and like you alluded to, the NBA has a lot to do with it. And watching Caitlin Clark and how they've adjusted the college game, and and then the one thing they typically have is the size in the front court. That sometimes we often lack up here, and so, but that's that's really kind of interesting. That the game has changed like that in that way.
An interesting team is Snowflake girls that this past year they had won the state championship. But Coach Perkins mentioned to us that he felt that Snowflake wasn't necessarily the best skilled when it came to basketball, but they were the most athletic.
Yeah, super athletic, and those kids are very dedicated to the weight room. I actually talked with their coach, Coach Brogan, because he was at we coached together for years. Greg Perkins and Coach Brogan and I. He was at Sholo most of the time, and then. They spend a lot of time, and there's a common denominator. They're all multi-sport athletes. A lot of them go from volleyball to basketball and then into track. And I think they won the state championship in track as well. But they spend a lot of time in the weight room. Those kids are very, very dedicated.
Yeah,
and working with their hands in the off season.
They got a good summer program. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the most skilled, but very physical. Anytime you can get that athleticism with the physicality, that's a tough combination to beat.
I recently went there for the the football game last weekend, last Friday on Halloween, and I've noticed that Snowflake has a really big sports culture, high school sports culture, and it's really cool to see their community rally behind them, because they certainly rally behind football. And then when basketball comes around, their fans rally around their team as well. And it seems like they're like that for all the sports, right? And the other thing I noticed too is that Snowflake has had a population boom. I went to the game and there were children everywhere. So there's gonna be a lot of up and coming athletes coming out of Snowflake in the next decade probably. And Coach Perkins also mentioned that there's a possibility that Snowflake could eventually become just 4A in all sports.
Yeah.
Right. So looking at Winslow and Holbrook, and I guess I can speak for Holbrook because I don't really know Winslow that well. But Holbrook, it seems like their crown jewel is basketball. So the whole community rallies behind the basketball team, and is Winslow sort of the same? I mean,
exactly. We're basketball. Has kind of always been the popular sport, and it's been the most successful program, in particular on the girls' side. The boys, we're coming. We're coming. But the number of, if you're basing it on hardware and trophies, and to credit to Coach Petronovich and what he did, and I feel like I did a solid job as his successor, because a lot of those teams, we had a run where we had 5 years on the junior varsity where we were undefeated, and those teams all became state champions. So it started in the lower levels. He had coaches that were very dedicated, and we put in the time, and then but yeah, everybody does rally around basketball, because the last few years some of our other programs have been down a little bit, and there is a good influx of the junior high, some kids coming up though that I think is going to really help.
Has has Winslow been affected by lower enrollment?
Yeah, our enrollment has definitely gone down. I see it as an elementary teacher, because and I think there's a lot of different variables. The Santa Fe slowed down, and that's the number one employer in Winslow. The prison, is kind of up and down, and but
the power plant too.
Power plant, yeah, and so we had a good influx of people when the wind farm was kind of getting built out on the 99, and that kind of has slowed down, and a lot of those people are young and they didn't bring their kids. They left their kids in Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, and had they brought their kids, those enrollments would have risen a lot. So I think we, if you look at the statistics and the numbers, we were both pretty close to having gone to 2A this past year, but we just made it over that hump by just a little bit.
Yeah, I know that Winslow has a tradition of sports excellence. One that always comes to mind is Emil Nazar with the football team. I know when I was in high school, Emil Nazar helped out with the Joe City football team for like 2 years, or I think he did maybe 4 years, something like that. I happened to be the last year that he did it. So, and I know they named the stadium after him. Right. And so I know Winslow and Holbrook have certainly had better days in the past. And when I went to the Snowflake game and seeing all the people there, I kind of thought, I was thinking maybe the way people describe like Holbrook back in the 70s and the 80s is probably how it was, like how the same environment was in that during that game. It was probably what it was like back then.
Right.
But I know from what some of the people who went to high school in the 70s and 80s, it was everyone always says Winslow was a boom town back in the 60s and 70s. But I guess a lot of the communities around I-40, or maybe other than Flagstaff, I guess, is sort of experiencing I guess a downturn in population.
Right. Yeah, I think what really helps them too is like they get their youth involved. There's a lot of youth referencing the Snowflake, like you said, you go to the games and even the basketball games, and the sections are, their gyms aren't as big as some of the gyms on the Navajo Nation and things of that nature, but the kids, you always see them along the sides, and they're doing things to, kind of generate that excitement. And you see it a lot with football. They had that big game last week with Arcadia that basically was for the number 1 seed in 4A. And there was just kids everywhere. I kind of listened in and watched it online a little bit. But so when you build that excitement, kids want to come. And I feel like, for me on a personal level, I have a little bit of an advantage because I work at the elementary school, and our new athletic director, Ricky Greer, and we coach. He was the boys coach for a while when I was the girls coach. We try to restore that tradition because I grew up in a small town, and I know how important that is, and getting those kids excited again about, just the little things, homecoming week and school spirit days. And it's kind of a lost art, but when you get kids to believe in something, a lot of positive things can happen.
Yeah.
So I guess we can pivot to the basketball team here. So I guess my first question is, what's the biggest difference from going from the girls program to the boys program?
I'd say right now the biggest difference is the tradition. We don't have that yet on the boys side because, and I tell them you have to earn that, through, through your accolades and going and improving yourself. Also the speed of the game, the boys game is so much faster, we have a couple guys that can get up pretty high. But the girls game, there's things that I already see that I missed from the girls game, the way they listen really well. But the excitement you get from the transition offense of a boy coming down the lane. And, we don't have a whole lot of tall kids up here, but, you have the one or two kids that can throw it down. That's really exciting. That's very rare in the girls' game. So
Do you have a lot of seniors this year?
I would say about half the squad will probably be seniors. But, to be real frank with you, I have some really, really good young talent. I have two, probably a freshman backcourt that I'm going to have, and I'm really excited about coaching those kids.
Yeah.
Is there, I guess, looking at the season here, do you have any games you're looking forward to?
Well, we're always looking forward to the Winslow Holbrook game because that's a great tradition, great rivalry. For me, I like to play under the lights and the big venues. So we get to go to Chinley this year and Window Rock. So, to get to play in two of the best venues in probably America is really exciting, and
Yeah.
so I'm looking forward to that. And, I enjoy coming to Holbrook because I like that. It reminds me of my high school and that come in that small hostile environment, and so those are some of the games I'm looking forward to. But, no game's more important than any other. I think you take it one game at a time, but, it's just good to be back, and, it's different when you're watching it from the stands.
For
And,
sure.
So you've, since you were the girls coach, I think Winslow spent a lot of time in the North Division or North Conference, right? Recently, Winslow got put back in the East. What, maybe 3 years ago? Is that, Mac? 3 or 4 years ago?
It was further back than that.
Further back than that?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably a little bit longer than that, almost 8 to 10 years, actually.
So what's the difference? What's the biggest difference between playing in the North and playing in the East?
In girls in particular, the North is the conference, the East has really improved, though. It's really strong, I'd say it's probably the second best conference. The crowds, you get a lot bigger fan base in the North because, they have the bigger venues and Window Rock and Chinley and Ganado, even, Tuba. So you're playing in front of a lot of bigger crowds. The East fans just don't travel as well, per se. Winslow and Holbrook always do, but
I'll
so
just say,
Alchese, yeah, I forgot about Alchese, and they, so Alchese is another one that's gone back and forth. So, I enjoyed both conferences though, both the East and the North, but there's just something about the fan base you get, and it's exciting, for your kids.
yeah.
And I think it really is a big advantage for the postseason. I always tease my coaching friends down south, and I said, come up and play up here, whether you're a boys or girls coach, because that's going to help your athletes in the postseason, because you can't simulate that in practice.
For sure.
So, I guess when it comes to your varsity team, I've always kind of thought that when it comes to coaching a varsity team, at that point, I mean, there is a little bit of teaching as far as skills goes, but I would imagine most of the time is maybe focused on strategy and trying to develop some kind of game plan
Right.
for whoever you're playing that week. Is that the case for you? I'm not a coach. I never coached.
Yeah,
I'm just
no, you're right. You're right. Totally right. At the varsity level, it's a lot of X's and O's. You're preparing for your opponent for that week, and maybe down the road, and a lot of times it's on short rest because once you get the stretch of the season, sometimes you're playing 2-3 games a week, and maybe even more. You get a game canceled due to inclement weather. Whereas in your lower levels, it's like with my new staff, for example, I said the number one thing I need from you guys is player development. Your job is to develop players for the varsity, and that's my job to get them ready for game day. But so that when you have that and you have that consistency amongst your staff, if you can keep your staff together, that's a big advantage. And I was very fortunate when I coached girls. I had Janine Barton, who's currently the girls coach at Winslow, and Jennifer Yazzie, who's also one of her coaches. So I was glad that she kept on board. And then, she brings out the legend, Coach Frank Stacy, who spent time with Coach Perkins in Holbrook and in Winslow. He's Winslow High School alumni. I mean, that's a big advantage, and I always tell young coaches, don't be afraid to hire someone smarter than you. I had, for example, one of my assistants was Eric Petronovich. I call him Baby Legend, Don's son. And, Eric never played the game, but he's one of the smartest minds. He sees things that maybe I didn't see because, his dad had him in the gym from the time he was an infant, And so, with me, my staff is one of the applicants, a gentleman by the name of Coach Brady Needings. He's going to be my JV coach I see him as an asset to the program.
What's his name again?
Coach Brady Needens.
Brady Needens.
Yeah, and he was one of the applicants, and I see him as an asset to the program. He spent some time coaching up in Colorado, a different type of style of basketball that we play. And then I hired Tyrell Young as my freshman coach. Tyrell was on the last Winslow High School state championship team, so he brings a different perspective. Two older guys that have been there, and then kids can see him, and he played a little bit of college ball, so I feel like I have a good group of coaches, and then my varsity assistant coach is Coach Ferlinez, and he does a lot with youth outside of basketball, and Ferlin was on the previous staff, and we kind of worked together a little bit last year at the junior high. Our kids are the same age, so we know it's going to be a long ride together. So I want to keep that consistent.
All know Ferlin, man.
Yeah,
Say that, man.
Good guy.
So one of the problems I have is my favorite sport is football. So I think I kind of take everything through the lens of football and maybe try to fit it into other sports. So when it comes to basketball and game planning, how do you implement strategy to your players? Because I think for me, when I look back on when I played high school sports, I really didn't understand the strategy. All I knew was my coach said, we need to go here and we need to do this, but kind of the thinking behind that and the reason, and maybe if all my teammates kind of knew the reason why, maybe we would have been more successful. But at that, maybe, I don't know, maybe we just weren't that great or something, but the strategy part of it, do you feel a lot of your players understand the strategy that you're trying to implement, or is it more or less like I described, just coach told me to go here, so we're going to do it like this?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think those teachings start, if you get, start them at a younger age. And so that's what we're trying to do, is get coaches down in the junior high that really kind of have the same vision as you. And once they get that strategy, they want to learn. They want to learn, they want to get better. For example, like help side defense, why am I in deny? Do you really understand what the purpose is? Why is 2 passes away are we in help side? And once they get that down, they're pretty understanding. But a lot of times they don't know it. You have to show them application, and so reviewing a lot of film. I'm a big film guy. I think kids need to study it. I think coaches need to study it even more and try to show them, because most of our kids today are visual learners. They need to see it, and we have so much technology that we didn't have years ago that help us, with that. And once they can see it, they'll believe it and apply it.
I feel like basketball, the advantage to basketball too is that the kids know each other's. They play against them all summer long,
right.
And to get prepared, like these kids know who they're playing and all that. Compared to like something like football, you don't play football during the summer or anything like that. So that's how I see that too.
Yeah. And I tell them, guys, there's no secrets, like, for example, we have a scrimmage a week from tomorrow in Flagstaff. I said, Coach Reyes I coached with him on the girls' side when he was at Coconino. He knows what I do. I know his formalities. It's just going to come out down to, who plays harder and who wants it more. You guys play against a lot of those kids in tournaments, and, it's just about execution. We're both going to be a little rusty, and, we won't see each other again unless we play each other in the Pepsi tournament,
Who's your first game against?
Our first game is against Chino Valley.
Chino Valley.
Yeah, and then Monument Valley. So
is it home or away?
Home, yeah. Home. So we're pretty excited about that. And but we scrimmage Flagstaff, and it'll be fun because I was teasing Coach Johnson. I said, now I get to watch you in the stands against Coach Barton. We coached against each other for so many years, but now I'm on the other side, and it's interesting too, because now you're seeing a lot of coaches I coached against in girls now in the guys game. For example, at Tuba City, Coach, you guys probably know Coach Kim Williams. She was the girls coach for years up there. And now she's called me the other day and said, I'm the boys coach. And Ashley Mitchell, I remember when Ashley Mitchell gave me nightmares as a coach, and when she played for Coach Chung, we couldn't stop her, That was my first year, matter of fact. And we had beat him the previous year in the finals when coach was his last year. And I knew they were going to be a problem for everybody. And she was, and she went on to have a great college career.
Yeah. How is I know you can develop the perfect plan, right? For any, or the perfect scheme for against any opponent. But I've always kind of assumed that you're always going to be held down by your lack of talent. So, sometimes you're lucky and you have a group of young men and young women that have a lot of talent and it's just pushed them in the right direction to get them there. And then sometimes you have maybe 2 or 3 players that have a lot of talent and maybe others, maybe not so much. I mean, still, still talented, but there's, missing links there, I guess. How do you go about, playing against a team like that when there's some areas where your team's not going to match up well?
So I think, you have to, obviously that's your job as a coach to try to develop a plan because, sometimes you'll go into competition and you're at a disadvantage, maybe they're bigger, faster, stronger than you, or they're deeper, they may have more things, but you have to think about what can you do to negate the game to your advantage. And so one of the things I really try to emphasize with my 2 younger coaches, the lower levels, is always think about how you'd beat your own team. If you can have that mindset, what am I going to do to beat my own team? You're going to be able to prepare for your weaknesses. So, but, I also believe that, even though you may have talent, hard work will always beat talent because you can, and I think Snowflake's a very good example of that. Going back to what we just talked about with the girls, they may not have been in the most athletic team, but it's very rare teams are going to outwork them, because they have that advantage in the weight room or their camaraderie, as a unit. So, when you have that, kids really today, this younger generation, sometimes have a hard time understanding how important that weight room is, and I'm not a big fan of lifting a whole lot during the season. I think the season should be for, the ropes and bands and things of that nature. But what you do in the off season will definitely dictate your season and postseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you see this at any level, whether it's professional or college football, the typical fan doesn't really understand what's going on behind the scenes, right? All they see is the performance of that night. And if it doesn't meet their expectations, fans, tend to start falling on the negative side of things, right? So I guess that's why I'm always, when we get coaches, I'm always curious as to, I ask these questions in hoping that, if fans were to see this, they kind of understand, the coach knows that there are some holes in our defense or offense, right? And we're trying to, scheme it in a way in which we can maybe try to minimize that and maximize something else out there. And I think, there's a lot of hard work put into that. And when fans don't get the result they want, they tend to want to, fall back on the negative things.
Yeah. And as a coach, we really don't worry about that too much as veteran guys that have been in it. We have a saying, people love you when you win, hate you when you lose, and sometimes hate you when you win, because if, you didn't get that individual outcome. And like one thing I try to emphasize with all my teams is never put yourself above the team, because a team will always beat 1 or 2 superstars. And, but you should try your best to give your fans a good show, because it's expensive to get in these games. And, when you have 2 or 3 games a night, but you have to kind of block out that. And, sometimes, especially when you go on the road, you may get booed or whatever, and that's mental toughness that we try to teach our kids, and those teachings start in the home with our own families. And then, just being able to block it out and try to, and, I said, you have to keep your composure as the coaches do, and I know they've put in one of the new emphases I was watching in my new coaching video is, you can actually get a technical foul for talking to the stands, fans and things as a player. So I think that's a good rule, because it kind of keeps everybody in check, Yeah. And, when we're all in check, there's good outcomes.
I know this is your first year, right? Doing boys basketball.
First year, yes.
I guess it's easier if I guess this question will make more sense next year. But you've lost some seniors that contributed a lot last year. And I wish I had it up. Honestly, Mac and I sort of focused more of our preseason rankings and analysis on the girls' side of basketball.
Right.
I still need to finish the boys' side of it, but I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Who was their Winslow's best player last year, Mac?
Isaac Davis.
Isaac David, yeah. So
Sorry, I didn't mean to answer.
Isaac David, I don't know. I don't have his statistics off the top of my head right now, but just thinking about his total point contribution throughout the whole entire season, those chunks of points, whether it's, I'm just going to pick a number. Let's say it was 200 points, total points throughout the season. That's not it. I just made it up, but let's say it's 200 points. Now he's graduated. So now you have this, my theory is in order to remain consistent, somehow you need to get one player or a group of players to match that 200 points that are missing, or at least get reasonably close. Do you kind of see, like, when you going into the next season, do you kind of view it that way, as how many points am I losing, or on the defensive side, how many turnovers or rebounds am I going to be losing from a senior coming out?
Right. Well, just sitting in the stands last year, Isaac was a huge part, but I also believe that you don't build your team around one individual, so per se. One of the big messages I'm always saying is 5 scores, and like for this year, for example, we've already lost our best player, which went back to a summer injury in Benali. It was, he tore his ACL, MCL. So, that put a lot of pressure because I'm planning on starting a freshman backcourt. And I told my guys, I said, you have to grow up fast, and I feel like they got that experience. So it's a lot of added pressure. But when you rely a lot on one individual, there's too many good coaches that can shut that down, but a mindset of 5 scores is tough to beat. And I'll give you an example. My 2013 girls team had Marcella Joe, who's now Marcella Nez, Tannen Tom, Shondine Armeo, who was an All-American, Haley Hayes. There was Laylane Benslow. We could go on to Tannen. I think I mentioned Tannen Tom. There was no weak spot, and it was just really tough to beat, because we had that mindset. They didn't care about who scored. All they wanted to do is win. And that's pretty impressive when you can get a group to be so unselfish like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are there any highlighted players that you have in mind that you want to mention?
I mean, there's a lot of good players. In the front court we have Jaden Curtis returning. Jaden did some really good things for his previous coach, and he's going to be a big part of what we do in the paint. I've been talking about Ian. He's hurt right now, but he's still our leader. I tell him, you're our captain, and coaches know who their leader is. But I have this amazing returning freshman backcourt, or this upcoming freshman court. I'm really excited about, in terms of Jacoby Chi and Antonio Yazzie. And so I'm really excited about them, and but we're still working on that roster, and there again, it's gonna always have that mindset of 5 scores.
You had because you said, I was talking to you a few weeks ago, and you're saying that some kids maybe came up to you from the South or something like that.
I got a really good transfer student athlete in from the Tuba area, and so we're really excited about him. And of course, they have to sit out, under all that transfer rule, and then we and my next group of athletes, I've had a few people, reach out, from down south. But, the good thing with the rule is a freshman can go anywhere they want, and my next class coming in next year is my son's in that group. And so I'm really excited, and, Ferlin and I, and credit to, some of our feeder programs, and, the Spartans in particular have really started the work. I will never take credit for that, and kids, they just follow their friends, if kids want to play with their friends, and it's best to get them coming into their freshman year. So that's exciting,
The little kids see the bigger ones, like kids like Isaac David, and they want to be like them, they're following their footsteps, man.
Right. So I was fortunate to coach the 7th grade boys last year, who are now 8th graders, and Ferlin and I worked together a little bit because our sons are the same age, and they look up to those kids. He wants to be like Ian Benali. He wants to be like Jacoby Chi, and they set the example. And then I tell him there's another generation that are going to want to be like you guys. And so watch how you carry yourself, and, because you're always setting an example for the next group. So it's a lot of fun to see kids have that. And I think that, goes back to like that tradition we talked about in small towns, and, kids wanting to be the next, star athlete or whatever.
Yeah, it's I guess it's. I mean, I would imagine a program is a lot easier to manage if your team has expectations, like a winning expectation. I'm assuming the girls have a winning expectation at Winslow, right?
Right.
So it's same thing with like Blue Ridge, for example. They have a winning expectation for football, right? Because of their past,
Right.
right. So I guess it's easy. It's easier when you have a relative or someone who was on a state championship team, or a cousin or a brother who played, several years ago, or a decade, or your grandpa or somebody, right? So it's easy to build a program and rally behind that tradition and expectation. And I kind of think sometimes Holbrook in particular kind of has that problem because they don't really have a winning tradition really in any sport. Really, I don't mean to say it to be disparaging or anything. I know they won the state championship in basketball in 2011, Mac?
2011.
2011, right? The girls basketball have never won a state championship. Football, they've never won a state championship. I think just baseball, I think it was the 87 season they won, right? So, and I think they won wrestling a couple of times. But so I always felt, because I helped out with Holbrook's football team back in 2016. So I kind of noticed, I felt that Holbrook just didn't have that winning tradition or expectation. So it was a lot harder to rally the kids around, this team and everything like that. I would imagine Winslow has had a lot of success in basketball. So I'm assuming having that expectation really helps your program.
Yeah. There's only 2 trophies at the end of the day. And I say 2 now because you have your open division in the small school, and then you have your 3A conference champion. But the first practice every year, whether it was girls or boys, the goal is always to try to win the state championship. If that's not your goal, then we shouldn't be there, as a competitor. So I talked to them. The fact is, I said, let's go on a field trip. And they look at me like, talking about, Coach. I take them out to the trophy case, whether it's girls or boys, and I show them that's expectation now. It's easier said than done, but, when you start to hear stuff enough, you start to believe it.
Yeah.
When you got belief, you got hope, Yeah. And so, we kind of do that. But I also talk about, players. And I'm not afraid to go back to the girls' side or the boys, It's actually kind of cool for me because Claude Renfro was, on the 79 boys state championship when I remember Don always talking about both girls and boys won it together. Claude's actually my cousin on my mother's side. And so that's pretty cool, and Claude played at Pima Community College and then Nebraska, never made it to the NBA, but that's a success story, and so we talk about that in tradition. And then I know Tyrell's probably getting tired of me saying he was on one of the last state championship, but they see that and hey, kids want to be like, somebody successful. And so to me, that's an asset to my program, having a young man like that. And I'm very thankful for that, Yeah, and going back, I had Dr. Michelle Tom come in and talk to our girls. I love guest speakers.
Oh yeah,
because kids get tired of hearing their coach talk all the time, and we have a lot of talented people around us that can come in. I've brought Sean Dean, Haley in, Marcella, different people, and they all bring a different wealth of knowledge beyond the game of basketball. So I think you have to utilize your resources, so to speak, to enhance that tradition.
How has there been an impact, on social media? I'll use this as an example. We have this podcast and we're talking about high school players. So there's certainly, do you think a format like this or Instagram or any other social media, do you think it puts an added pressure on these players to perform well?
I do, for me personally, I don't have it. I think it's a great tool if you use it. I'm just kind of old school in that way. But I think, it's also a great outreach to get some exposure for our student athletes, especially in northeastern Arizona, scouts can go down the road to Chandler a few minutes, and that's a much easier drive than coming way up here. But I do think it adds a little bit of pressure, because they always, sometimes kids they want to be the latest, greatest, and instead of sometimes just going out and playing, being themselves. So there's always that pressure because, they're getting it at home and then their coaches and their peers. And it's just tough being a student athlete in today's era. There's so many more challenges than I think kids face than we had as when we were youth.
Yeah, it's interesting now, given that the name, image, and likeness, right, as well. And, one of the things that we talked about on a previous podcast was building your brand. And now that we have social media and it seems like a lot of athletes, especially, the top athletes that go to the Division I, right, they're building their brand in high school. They're putting things out on the internet to promote themselves so that when they get there, they can, maybe get some kind of additional compensation for their talents, right? So have you seen anything like that when you been coaching, as far as individual players maybe trying to push their brand out there?
No,
or even creating a brand, I guess.
Personally, I haven't. I've seen, the use of social media with student athletes, but not yet with the name, image, likeness type of thing. But I think it's coming. I think times are different than they were, and like, just like reading up on different individuals. I knew who Koa Pete was before he got to U of A, and I'm a big Wildcat fan, so I knew who AJ Dinabasta was, and through some of those avenues, but from a personal perspective, I haven't seen it, yet, but I think it's coming because times are changing,
Yeah, when we spoke with Ryan, he was mentioning just some of his maybe not his players, but he was just saying that sometimes young men and young women will sometimes put immature things on social media, which kind of puts themselves in a negative light, right? And I had mentioned to him that now is the time to, because in the age of social media, if you're legitimately good at a sport, for example, it's in the high school level, you should probably start trying to build your brand so that if you do go to the next level, you have some kind of platform to get some kind of additional compensation.
Right. And, I always tell kids, you got to be smart in what you post, and, because, there's, believe it or not, a lot of these colleges, whether it be community college or university, they have people that actually check that on, they want to make sure, with kids getting paid, name, image, likeness, that actually check their social media before they go and make sure that they're recruiting the kind of kid that they're looking for, and so, and that's why you have a group, some people that aren't really into it per se. And then you have others that, if you use it properly, it can be a big tool, that you see it in the job market, a lot of, for example, in our school district, a lot of times you'll see it posted online and in different platforms. And that's good because it kind of opens up the outreach to getting the best quality teachers per se or whatever. But
yeah, one of the interesting things that I've seen is we talked with with Ryan and Nate, and they sort of told us about their journey from starting their team and eventually finding out when it comes to college recruiting, places where you'd want to take your student athlete to. He had mentioned an NCAA sanctioned event is one of them, where actual college coaches come to view potential people for their program, right? So to me, it shows me that we're starting to rural community members are starting to see some of these pathways to take these young people to the next level, right? And now that they've sort of figured this out, I think the next step really is to really try to explore the social media part of it, because when you get there, it does open that avenue for additional compensation. And I guess in some ways, though, I think that whole name, image, and likeness is sort of reserved for these really top players that companies are willing to give money because it's basically advertising, right? And they want to put their product around this person. So I guess it doesn't necessarily impact every single college athlete, but I think as a young person, if you're legitimately going to go to the next level, I think it's something to take into consideration.
Right.
Like the gal from Sandia. She went to play for BYU. She's playing for BYU now.
Right.
I don't know if she did anything as far as social media wise, but I thought that would have been a great opportunity for her to put herself out there to try to do something to get additional compensation for that.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It's you said you had to, especially in rural Arizona, you need to go to lot bigger things. For example, one of the things we used to do that Coach Petronovich started is he would take our girls to the San Diego Classic, because you go to that, and I mean, there was college coaches, and honestly, like, that's where they started to discover the Armeo girl that played for me, Shondine Armeo. Her coach was Tara Vanderveer at the time's sister, that was at Stanford, and Stanford is one of the top women's basketball programs in the country, and she ended up picking University of California, San Diego, and then social media was just starting to get started a little bit, during that time. But there's a lot of things you can do. But I think it's also as coaches' responsibility to help advocate for our kids too. And then parents have a responsibility too.
Yeah.
Don't pin it all on the coaches. Start the clearinghouse, which you alluded to at an early age. Our responsibility is to try to tell them that not everybody's going professional. But if you can get a college education for free out of it, that's a win in itself. And so I always tell kids, it doesn't matter where you go to play or go to school, it's what you make of it. Get your education, get a career, that you can go to work and be successful for your family.
Yep. I've seen some high schools, they have they advertise like Instagram. It's an Instagram page for their high school basketball teams or something like that. I noticed that Valley Christian had one of those. How do you feel about that?
I think if you have to, as a coach, I would want somebody that, you really can trust with that, because you're dealing with other people's children, and you got to be really careful in today's era. If you have somebody that really knows what they're doing with it and wants to put that kind of time into it, I think that's a great resource. I don't think that's the coach's responsibility per se to try to, his or her job is to try to coach these athletes to be, better individuals and to get them prepared on and off the court. But it's a great tool. Some of us are better at it than others. I personally don't know what I'm doing with social media. But if I had questions, I would ask my wife or something, or a parent that, I really trust. And then that ties to the part where I said, I think parents have a responsibility to help, get their kids exposure to. And we're very fortunate up here in Northeastern Arizona. All our kids play a lot of basketball, and they, whether it be with their club team or AAU team, so they're getting that exposure. Kids love to play basketball up here. And that's really good, and I have no problem talking with other coaches, if my kid plays for, whatever their club team is or their NABI team. But, I always say, your loyalty, make sure it lies to your school and your team too. Let's find that happy medium. So, I never try to schedule anything in July, because I know that's NABI, and I like to go watch it. Mm-hmm. It's fun as a coach, to kick back right before I have to start going to work in the classroom and just be a parent and watch my kids, and I root for all of them. So I got a chance to go watch a lot of my boys play this past year and down in Abbey, and that was fun just to sit in the stands and really watch them. And, and I got to see some other kids, and I'm thinking, well, that might be how we have to try to slow that kid down, Mm-hmm.
So what's the biggest challenge of being a coach at Winslow? And for Holbrook, Coach Perkins mentioned three things. First one was lack of facilities. They don't have enough gym space to adequately schedule practice. That would, I guess, help both teams out, boys and girls. The second one was a lot of their student athletes, get bussed in from the reservation to come to school to Holbrook. And the last one was eligibility. Does Winslow have sort of the same?
We experience, so facilities is not a problem with us, because our court, goes into three courts, our gymnasium, Petronovich Gymnasium. For us, that's not a problem. Everything, the old Bulldog belongs to the junior high, so they have sole, other than game night. we'll play our lower levels. But definitely the busing situation, we have the dorm's full this year. We made sure of that, but we do have a lot of kids that opt to not stay in the dorm. And so, you have to work with those families and I always tell them safety first. But eligibility is always, and I tell our kids, the fact is I just gave this speech tonight. I said, you guys are fortunate. Our eligibility is a lot more lenient than a lot of schools, and that's going to change. So start making those moves now. I said, it's unheard of anywhere else to play with a D or an F for 1 week, and a lot of schools down in the Valley or Southern Arizona, it's A, B, and maybe even the C rule would be like pending or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And once you change the mindset, with kids, but the academic side, but, having the technology is actually a really good tool. For example, I don't have to send out 75, 80 kids papers of the kids that are trying out and say, go get a teacher's signature. Hey, you guys got your phones, pull up your Power School. Let me see it right there. Save everybody time, So we enhance it in that way, and kids, when they know you care, they're pretty honest with you, about that. But I don't know if you guys saw our new buses we got in Winslow. That brought a lot of excitement. Oh, yeah. These 2 buses. I said, man, I came back at the right time, because
I think I seen them in the parade or something.
Right, and I haven't actually been on them yet, but I'm looking forward to that because as I'm getting older as a coach and I want to ride first class. That's pretty cool,
Is it like an actual travel bus or is it?
Yeah, it's a nice like a bus. It doesn't have like a restroom or anything. Uh-huh. So I tell I was teasing my athletic director Ricky Greer. I said, yeah, we got the Cadillac, but Winter Rock got the Cadillac with the diamond in the back, because I'd always tease my coaching friends up there. Let us borrow one of them, But
I seen Page was a pretty nice bus.
Yeah, there's a lot of schools that have nice travel buses, and I mean, I remember Don said he bought those the old Bulldog buses probably in the late '90s. Oh, really? So I was still in high school, and they got to the point where they were running pretty rough. We were patching them up and they painted them and stuff. But, and main thing is in the winter, you want heat and comfortable. You want it to be warm in there because that's a long ride home from Page when it's cold.
Speaking of buses, does Winslow, do they offer after school bus runs? Like for sports and all that?
Like an activity bus?
Activity bus. There is occasionally certain times of the year, but with budget cuts and a lot of different things, it's not not as much as we used to have back that I can remember. A decade ago, we do have the dorm's really good though about coming to pick up the kids and
I've heard that like a long time ago and all that, but I kind of think that's one of the reasons why a lot of Delcon kids are starting to come to Holbrook now too, because Holbrook offers activity buses and Winslow didn't at the time. Yeah.
So we do have some buses that run, but they're not every day per se. We used to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but I have to give the administration credit, and they've done a lot of things to really try to, make it easier for kids. And, like we have early release Friday. And a lot of kids like that. We like it as teachers. We have to keep working, but it's nice, and kids can come in, and then if you have a few kids, you need to do some extra tutoring, or as basketball coaches want to get a shoot around. Mm-hmm. That's nice to be able to do because you're out of school.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about the early release. Some schools don't even have school on Friday, right?
Right.
And I'm like, when I went to school, I had to go to school Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And then I remember back when school used to start like in August. Mm-hmm. It starts in August, or not August, September, I mean.
Right.
Right. So we had that extra month now, and everything's kind of, well, maybe I'm not sad about that part, but but they're not going to school on Friday. Yeah. I used to be a teacher at Holbrook.
Okay.
And this was way before they implemented this. But I guess from a teacher's perspective, it'd been nice to not have school on Friday.
I agree with you. Yeah. I have a lot of relatives in the Page area, and my in-laws always tease me, and they don't have school on Fridays. And it's actually, a lot of people believe it's a big advantage. I talking to my good friend, Coach Justin Smith at Page. He said, they've been able to recruit really good quality teachers, because they're really rural more than us, and they like that, and families can have a 3-day weekend. Yeah. And it's just a win-win because they don't have a dormitory up there. So, a lot of their kids are coming from Kaibato, or my wife's from Navajo Mountain, really far away, you know, and so, that's a conscription house. Bitter Springs down below. And so it's kind of, it's just a really big advantage. You can really work hard this because you really only have to add a few more hours to your calendar or minutes, to your calendar day. So, but for some families that's hard too. Cause I can see the other side of it if they don't have childcare and things of that nature.
What are some of the, or I guess, what's your thoughts on the copper tournament? And I'm asking because I know Coach Perkins is a big critic of the copper tournament.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I'm kind of with Coach. I wasn't a big fan of it. When I was coaching girls, I thought, I'm still really firm believer that it needs to be charter and private and then public. I'll say that, and I'll die on that mountain. But I'm not a big fan of it. I think it ruined a lot of traditional teams playing versus each other because, I just believe put everybody in one tournament, in terms of, and one thing I'd like to see personally, Arizona do, in particular in the small schools. I don't think it can be done in the big schools because I think Arizona just has too many, but New Mexico seeds their teams and they have for years and it usually works. And what that does is it credits strength of schedule. Greg has always been really good about playing the best of the best. He's never shied away from that. And so you might have a team that may be like, let's say 28-2, and they get a 1 seed, and then you might have a team 15-15, and they get a high seed because they've played some really good teams. So if you look at how New Mexico, they figured it out, it usually gets your 2 best teams in the finals. Now, would you be able to do that in inner city Phoenix? I don't think so because we have 10 schools for every school in New Mexico. It's just too big of a city. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of it.
Mm-hmm. What about? Do you think the 3A East? Yeah, the East should bring back the conference tournament.
I would like it, but I know it didn't really generate much revenue, and that's a big thing. But especially without just being in there, I think that layoff kind of hurts. I think our teams. So yes, I do think they should bring it back. And there's a lot of coaches that have mixed feelings about that. A lot of coaches will put their kids on what we call load management during that time. And me, I've always believed that sends a really bad message to your kids. Because, you could get hurt walking down the street. And if you want to start peaking at the right time and when you as a coach know when your team's rolling, you know when your team's peaked too early. Yeah. We're never going to tell our kids that. But, those that have been there, we know that for a fact, So, yes, I do believe they should bring it back. I think every conference should have a conference tournament. I was actually reading today that this year the 2, if I understood the rule correctly, the top 2 teams in each region in 3A will get automatic bids to the at least the play-in games. Mm-hmm. So that was something that's different.
That's
last year.
New Mexico does too. They have the conference tournaments.
Yeah, they have like a district tournament.
Yeah.
So I was just talking with a good friend. He's up in Roswell, New Mexico at Goddard, and their volleyball team's doing really well. And they have like a region championship, district championship, and then everybody goes to Albuquerque. And so I said, well, if you guys, I got a scrimmage next Friday in Flagstaff. If you guys get to the finals, I'm gonna be in Albuquerque to come support you. A good family friend, and so.
Yeah, I know that Coach Perkins was saying one of the reasons, well, at the very least, that Holbrook didn't approve of a conference tournament was the lack of PowerPoints. Didn't count towards your power rankings, or is it called power rankings, or is that a?
You're right.
Power rankings.
Power rankings,
okay.
PowerPoint. They're just synonyms for each other. Yeah. So like, kind of making that analogy between us and New Mexico. In New Mexico, they count everything. Tournaments. We don't count our tournaments in Arizona for state seating. So, like a lot of coaches will rest kids, but, if you have like a transfer kid, they have to sit that one tournament and then they're eligible for the second tournament plus half your season. So, it's an opportunity, but I tell kids don't complain because back in the day, it used to be you had to sit both tournaments. But yeah, it doesn't count for anything. But the North thing, look at the excitement it generates in the 3A North, I tell all my coaching friends, I'm coming up there to scout you. You know, why lie to them? You know, it's and it's just fun to watch. You know, I remember that year we played in 13. We played Valley Sanders 4 times when Valley was tough. You know, that was their first year up in 3A, and just that excitement. It got tougher each time playing them. You know, and then we ended up meeting them in the finals. But it just generates some excitement. You don't get that in anywhere else in this 5A, 6A. They don't see those kind of crowds. And, you know, and it's a huge advantage for their schools because each school in the North gets a cut of that revenue. And so, you know, as fundraising is so hard, that's one of the hardest things about coaching, you know. Nobody wants to do it. It's just hard work, you know. So, yeah, it just generates a lot of excitement.
Okay. Yeah. One of the phenomenons I noticed is, especially in the North, fan participation has diminished over the last 20 years. I went to the Kayenta Holbrook game last year, and or this past season, I mean, and you know, they had built this. Well, I guess at the time it was a big gym, but now, from what people used to say, they used to pack the gym on all 4 sides, and now they just were able to barely do just the main bleachers there. The same thing for like Winter Rock. They built that big gym, but you know, they don't have the fan participation to fill it up as they, I think, originally had hoped. Same thing for Ganado. So I've always kind of thought maybe one of the reasons why it was like that is possibly maybe the cost of going to these different games have gone up, whether it's food and gas and all that stuff, and also the rise of Sports Zone, you know, showing some of these games on the internet.
Right. I think you hit it on the, you know, right on the dime. You know, it's more expensive for families, you know, and, you know, with a possible recession, or some say we're already in a recession, you know, coming, you know, they just, it's just not affordable for everybody. If you have a big family, you know, and then you factor in fuel and meals and all that. But, you know, like you said, you know, Sports Zone does a really good job of streaming the games. You have a lot of people go Facebook Live, and, you know, iTalk covers a lot of games, and that's why I say, you know, I tell coaches, you can't hide anything. We live in a digital era, you know, and coaches trade film with each other, you know. But yeah, you just sometimes don't see the fan base, you know, like you used to. And then I think too, if teams are winning, you know, you kind of look at the pattern, the stands are full, but maybe they have a down year and everybody goes through those roller coasters, you know. Nobody stays on the top forever. The fan bases tend to drop, you know. So, you know, it's kind of goes back to that whole notion I talked about, you know.
Yeah, it seems like they're in the rural communities. I think 2 years ago I went to the Holbrook versus Valley Sanders football game, and I believe at the time Valley Sanders was last in their conference. And but even though, you know, their team was last in their conference, the whole community came out and watched the football game anyways. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that there wasn't anything else to do on a Friday.
Right.
So everyone just came out and to kind of hang out and just kind of be a part of this event that was happening.
Yeah, you know, that's cool though. You know, they still support the kids, and like you said, the more rural, if you don't have nothing to do, you know, sometimes high school football, basketball, or whatever is the only thing to do, and it brings a lot of people together. And I always tell I kind of get around with the support forces. That's a big program in Winslow, you know, and they've been very successful. We had a coach by the name, she's gone on now, but her name was Tammy Ramsey, and she passed on, and she won multiple state championships with our dance team. And then her daughter's now coaching, so that tradition. But anytime they're performing, man, it is packed. And I think that's neat. And so, you know, they've been using the North Court because they're getting ready for state competition. And I always tell coaches, don't be selfish, you know. Nobody's program's above anybody's. It's easier to work with people. Success breeds success, you know. And, you know, that's really cool. But when those kids are performing, man, those stands are packed. So I said, let's have them every night. You know what I mean? It's good for everybody, you know, and things like that. So when you get those little kids involved or try to get those younger kids involved, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Excuse me. Player development. I think you mentioned Do you work with the junior high coaches?
So yeah, last year I was actually the 7th grade coach. That's kind of how I kind of got back in the game, and and then I'm going to be working with them, and we're all running the same system, same defenses, same offenses, and things like that, same plays. Those kids actually know it really well, and there's some great leadership down there, and so yeah, we're all working together, and I'm trying to get involved with the city league a little bit too. Because it makes it so much easier, and if you have kids, then you don't have to spend all your time on those little teachings,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, if you can get those kids involved, I was thinking back on some of my best girls teams were the ones where we really had the same coaching staff and everybody was running the same thing and same consistency. So you got to get those kids excited too. Go out and talk to them. You're not supposed to influence them, hey, to come to, so to speak, but there's nothing wrong with going down there and talking to them and encouraging them, because I always say a kid's handshake and a hug will take you a long way with kids, And coaches, once they trust you, and I'm talking to them at school, don't get me wrong, getting excited, come out. And I give extra credit as a teacher for going to Bulldog sporting events. I think that's important, kids like that, they get excited for it, and they scream your name at the game, and yeah, you want to watch the game, but kids we want to get them off the phones and the video games and get out in stands and support Bulldog athletics or wherever you go to school at. It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, community involvement is I think it's essential for building not only a community but also a good sports program as well at your high school. And I think this past spring, my fiance's nephew participated. I think it was like an intramural or something that was going on in Winslow. And it kind of made me wonder, because I think Holbrook doesn't have an intramural league anymore, does it?
Not anymore. Yeah. Delmore's talking about bringing it back, but hasn't happened yet since COVID, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I noticed a lot of kids play in our league, and but a lot of our kids go play in Kiki's league and Flagstaff too.
Yeah,
so, because it's a little bit different competition. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say that, we did that with our kids, and, but we were looking at it as an opportunity to get more games, see some different level competition, and yeah, it's Sandra Knight does a really good job, who's our athletic director's sister, with the city league and getting those kids involved. And I passed those flyers out in school, man, and they go crazy getting them. It's really exciting. And then they started travel baseball with the kids in Winslow. That's really big thing too. And it's expensive, but it's building that excitement because we don't have baseball at our middle school. We recently got cross country, and all year, kudos to Holbrook. They won the White Mountain League in junior high, and boys and girls, and we were right there behind them. But we're only in our second year of existence, and I want to really, thank Mr. Thomas and Miss Cly for what they did with the kids. So yeah, that's only going to help Janine. Janine and Wilbur.
I always wonder why they don't have a junior high baseball. They have junior high softball, but not a baseball.
Yeah, so nobody evidently in the White Mountains, because, Winslow and Holbrook are both in the White Mountain League, plays baseball. But, I always said the White Mountain League or the junior high is not sanctioned to the AIA per se. So why not go and play like the Verde Valley and hit like Prescott, Camp Verde, Cottonwood, I think it's coming in Winslow. Coach Greer and Mr. Garrett have done a really good job with this travel ball, but not everybody can afford travel ball. So I think if you get 2 or 3 schools start doing it, you're going to start seeing a domino effect,
So,
But yeah, like you said, they have softball, but they play in the fall. Softball up here for junior high, and so that means that something else is going to suffer, and that means possibly football. Soccer is really taking off. We just started soccer, I think, 2 years ago in Winslow, and you guys have had it for a while here in Holbrook, and it's getting kind of popular.
There needs to be a revival in golf. I know Winslow used to have a golf team, but that was back when they had at least a short golf course, right?
They had the course
Walmart.
right there by Walmart Maverick, and now there's a hotel there. But yeah, that was pretty cool. I remember that. They were good. Mr. Bratt, Coach Bratt, who coached, Winslow for years. I believe he was the golf coach. He did a good job with those kids. And I don't know anything about it, but yeah, it's pretty anything that, that's good for kids is, really good, any kind of programs, it just takes a long time. I know, both Winslow and Holbrook have kind of gone through it with soccer, those wins don't come right away. But success takes time. And so, yeah, I'd like to see that program come back. Definitely.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of golf. I try to encourage everybody to, all, whether it's my younger nephews or, to at least explore golf. It's a great sport. The only downside to it is, it's very expensive. And, not very much access, especially up north right here. Holbrook, we have the luxury of having a golf course here. So that allows Holbrook High School to have a high school golf team. So I think it's definitely a challenge for a lot of communities around here. I know Snowflake, I think for the 3A or whatever league Snowflake's in, I know they had a couple state championships.
Nice.
They did have a professional golfer who I think he played 2009 or something like 2008. He made it to, I think he briefly made it on the PGA Tour, but wasn't able to maintain his status on the tour. But
it's amazing, though. Yeah, and I know, like in Winslow, swimming's taken off, and swimming's really good, in terms of, I don't know anything about it, but, in terms of using different muscles, and it's one of the best, if you
they have a swimming facility?
Yeah, we have the indoor facility. So they use, when it starts to get cold, like now, they're using the indoor right across from the Art Griffith Student Center.
I didn't know they had that.
So it's not regulation size, so they have to do all their meets in Flagstaff or, down in the Verde Valley. But it's a program that's really taken off, and they've done a good job. I believe Reese Chatwin is our swim coach, and kids are starting to come and, try different things. It's kind of pretty neat to watch them.
Yeah, I wonder why they don't go to Joe City. I know Joe City has a full-size swimming pool. I think like a full-size Olympic-size swimming pool.
Wow.
Yeah,
they may swim against them. I don't know all their schedule, but that's a program that I see really starting to take off.
Because I went to high school in Joseph City, so a lot of their facilities was built back in the 70s and 80s because of the plant. So Joe City does have a lot of I guess it's sort of outdated now, but they've had the luxuries of having some things added that none of the schools around here did, like the auditorium and then the swimming pool as well. But even though they have that, I think, back when I was, elementary school, junior high, I know that swim team during the summer was big in Joseph City.
Right.
But as far as high school swimming, I don't believe they do anything with it.
But they have some amazing athletes that, was the softball team won it, 2-3 years straight?
Yeah.
And then, that group of athletes. And it's kind of interesting because some of those kids I actually taught in elementary school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I told one young lady in particular, I said, you were supposed to be my basketball manager, but, kudos to her. She did really well. And I'll tell you what, we played them this summer in basketball, and they gave us fits. Yeah, we barely pulled it off. And I tell kids, don't ever underestimate just because it's a 1A, 2A, 3A.
They had a good girls program this year.
Yeah,
too.
it comes down to really a lot of times who wants it more. And I think we won in the last maybe 30 seconds, but they gave us fits. And some of our kids kind of overlooked them, But, I think they got a good chance at winning in both girls and boys basketball. I know there's 3 young ladies, sisters from Winslow, and they're good basketball players, and they can crush that softball. And I remember, some of those kids in elementary school, for whatever reason, a lot of people like that 4-day school week, though. That's a big selling point. So, as a coach, you kind of want to see other schools around you do well too,
Sure.
I'm always rooting for Mac's daughter too. And, we kind of support each other's families. That's just good karma, and, anybody that loves sports supports everything, and you want to see kids do well. I have no problem helping a kid from Holbrook, and I used to always cheer for Dea too. And I just think that's good karma,
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's great. And it's always good to see, good interactions between communities. Sometimes I'm not sure if it's more prevalent with the older generations, not necessarily dislike, but sort of just this, I don't know, in 1970, whatever it was, stuff like that.
Right. Those little rivalries. Huh?
Yeah.
Everybody likes to live in the the glory years, you know. And, you know, I don't know Coach Delmar real well, but I look forward to some battles with him. And, you know, I always tell Coach Perkins, I call him Che, and you know, because he was the boys coach in Holbrook when I was an athlete in Southern Arizona at Coolidge High School. And, you know, I never dreamed we'd be coaching against each other. And, you know, and so we laugh, you know, and we still talk, you know. But it's a lot of fun, you know, and we're looking forward to all these battles with all these coaches, you know, and it's just weird you know, and seeing them now on different sides. And the East has gotten a little bit stronger. I still don't think we have the respect up here that, you know, like you said, the South. I was looking at a lot of the preseason polls, and it's all South. I was talking to my buddy at Page. I said, dang, nobody up here got any love. You know, on the boys' side, and the girls, it's the exact opposite. You know, it's Ben Franklin, number 1, Coolidge, number 2, Valley Christian, number 3, and Push Ridge. And I think there was another team out of Tucson. And I said, wow. But, you know, they have all one common denominator. They have big size in the front line. And you know, Push Ridge deserves some respect. They won the 3A division last year. Valley Christian, the defendant, and whatever.
You know, you're the first person to mention that. Coach Perkins was here, and he asked us who won the 3A state championship, and we had no idea who it was.
Yeah, so for sure. Yeah. So they won it in the boys, and you know, and I think Coolidge and Holbrook ended up playing each other last year. So in Valley Christian, what did they win it, like 3 or 4 straight in the open division? So they're always going to be good, you know. And you know, it's just some of those other teams. And I think a team that they're overlooking, though, just based on what I saw this year, is Payson. Payson's got a great crop of kids.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, they're big and athletic. And, you know, and we didn't play them this summer, but we saw them. And then having coached junior high last year, they have some good upcoming talent on the boys' side. I'm not too sure on the girls. But, you know.
Is Payson, they're not East no more, though, right?
No, they're like with the Central Division. So, yeah. But, you know, if you really look at it, there's a common denominator that like who's, like I said, Ben Franklin, preseason number 1. Who's number 1 in small school football? Ben Franklin. So you get that crop of athletes that are multi-sport, and they just go from, you know, the next sport. And a lot of kids, too, in rural cities, they know that they can be really good at maybe a small charter school or a prep school versus, you know, being just average at a big school. And so you saw Fountain Hills, I think, is a good example of that when they had some really good runs. A lot of those kids could have went to Saguaro or Chaparral, or, you know, but they like their opportunities at Fountain Hills.
So what year did you play high school basketball?
So I graduated in 1997 for Coolidge, and I played for a gentleman by the name of Dave Glasgow, and he actually came back, and he's the coach. He went to Sierra Vista for a couple of years. So I played with like the UTs and
1997.
98 team beat Coach Mendoza's team at Alchese, and he's actually now helping the assistant coach to Coach Glasgow. Yeah. I talk to Coach Mendoza periodically. It's I'm gonna tell you guys how small of a world that we live in. Coach Mendoza, we're both from Gila River. We're both Pimas, and he actually used to chop cotton for my grandpa.
Yeah, I remember.
Isn't that amazing?
You tell me that.
Yeah, so we were going through some archives and different things, and they all work together on the farm. So small world.
I asked because I thought I saw a YouTube video. Someone had posted one of the state championships from maybe it was 97, something like that. And it was, I think it was like Coolidge versus like Monument Valley or something.
Okay.
Who
or was it out to say maybe a 98? Coach Mendoza's thing.
Did your team make the state championship?
We didn't win the state championship. In 97, it was Monument Valley beat. That was when they had Brian Holiday and Bob Manheimer, who both went on, played at MPC, and you know, Bob played at Lamar University, and Brian played for NAU. So that team was amazing.
How is it? I guess how has North boys basketball changed since the 90s?
You know, it's probably not as strong, I'd say. You know, because now you have a lot more of these prep schools, and the divisions are a lot bigger. You know, but I think it's coming back slowly. But in the 90s, you know, especially the late 90s, you had some really good teams. Coach Anderson's team went Monument Valley. They went back to back. And then, you know, you had Page in there when they had the Harriet's kid that played for Stanford. And so, you know, there was just some really amazing teams during that time.
I think Tuba City had a back-to-back, right? I remember seeing like bumper stickers or something that said like 2 Pete or something like that.
Yeah, Coach Charles Gover. Yeah, won back-to-back.
Gray Hills.
Gray Hills, yeah, when they had Lamont Ayazi. And,
Yep.
yeah, and there's amazing teams. And, it's just a lot of the power kind of shifted, and it's, I'm very honest with my boys. I said, right now the South has the power. Nobody's won it up here since, I believe, Page and the boys. Is that correct? And Page was the last team, I think, to win it up north. And
what year was that?
You figure probably 4 or 5 years ago, because Valley Christians won it for the last 3. Coach Smith was
Page made this. I'm
yeah,
so out of touch with it.
They won it. I want to say about 5 years ago. And so that's the last team I can recall.
Maybe against Fountain Hills or against Foothills or somebody maybe.
Yeah, I don't remember who they beat, but that's the last team I recall that have winning it up north on the boys' side. And then, of course, you had Winslow that 1 year. And
then Holbrook.
And Holbrook won it. But it's been a while. We've had other teams get there.
Like Monument Valley, right? A couple years ago.
Yeah, and they ran into that tough Valley Christian team. And that was a really good run with that MV team. Everybody was rooting for them,
We had seen Monument Valley play, or not Monument Valley, well, both Monument Valley and Valley Christian here because they both came to, and from what I was told, Valley Christian that year, they had one of their players try out for the Israeli national team.
Something to that effect, yeah.
He was really good.
Yeah.
And just the whole team in general was good. Everyone was over 6 foot tall on the team. Everyone could jump. And they had a really high 3-point shooting percentage as well. And I think that just killed a lot of teams. And they just love to shoot 3-pointers. Then Monument Valley at the same time too, that year, a lot shorter, but they had a lot of very skilled players.
Yeah.
And I think it was, to me, I guess it was surprising that Monument Valley had made it that far. Because I know Holbrook beat them, but I don't know, maybe I'm just biased or something.
No, they peaked. They definitely peaked at the right time. I think they ended up upsetting like Coolidge or something in the semifinals that year, and it got really hot, in the right time. But I think it went back to the region tournament. I think they hit their peak. They upset Page, if I remember correctly, that year, and they just kind of rode that wave and did a really good job,
Is it truly, Coach Bergens mentioned, it requires a lot of luck? Is that true?
I think in the tournament, it does require quite a bit of luck, I always said there's a few factors. You got to keep your guys healthy, you got to hit your peak at the right time. And eligibility, because that's like time around finals and and all those variables. But yeah, you need that little bit of luck, and that's why, going back to that previous question, I think the region tournament is so important, because I think looking back at some of my most successful teams, we hit our peak during that right time, and sometimes the ones we just didn't go as far, and in the tournament, it's one bad game, and it's over, and sometimes teams have that one game of their lives where they shoot lights out, and that's all it takes,
Like Chinley girls last year.
Yeah, and anybody can get really hot at the right time.
Well said. Mac, do you have any more questions?
I got one question. Of all the teams you coach, you working with Dawn and all that, who would you consider the best girls team out of Winslow? What year?
That I coached or that Dawn coached?
I don't know. You can decide.
For me, my coach is my 13 team. 2013 team. We were big, athletic. That's Marcella Nez, point guard, Leilene Winslow, Haley Hayes, Shondine Armeo, Matea Begay. I had, 3 kids that were all state on that team. Player of the region, small school player of the year. So that team was special because they won the ultimate prize, and they did it the right way. They were great kids. But one of the greatest accomplishments I'm more proud about those girls, they all got higher education. Mm-hmm. And that's phenomenal. Now, like Tannen's a doctor, Shondine's a doctor, and so, but some of the teams that Don had, when he had Shelly Tom, he said those teams were really impressive. I was just a kid, an infant, and so I never really saw those teams, but, I think some of those teams, they were really good. He said his 1997 team with Verlaine Cascoli and some of those teams were really good. So, you know, I would say probably that or the 2013 team. But that's very, you know, hard to project, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The one team that sticks out in my mind is the, I think it was the 08-09 team, the team that lost to Monument Valley in the state championship. Because I remember following that team that year, the Winslow team. And, man, I thought they were really good.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when I think about the fact that I remember them, it just shows how good they were.
Yeah.
And there are certain teams where you can just tell, you know, they're serious, their facial expression is just everything about it. You know,
Right.
you can just tell that
Yeah.
that they're here to win and then they're taking this thing seriously.
Was that the one where Bradley tipped it in?
Yeah.
Bradley Nash?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was really heartbreaking, you know, because looking back on it, we probably should have pressured the ball, you know, for the full court. But yeah, there's, you know, and to be real honest with you guys, the team the year after on paper was more talented than the 14 team, but we had that one bad night where Fountain Hills couldn't miss a shot. And, you know, so sometimes the best team on paper didn't always win,
No.
you know, and so. Yeah, that's probably the one I remember the most, you know, and I hope down the road I'll be able to say that about one of my boys' teams, you know.
Sure.
So, and I'm sure we will be able to, you know, because like I said, this is a really good group of, I like young teams because they don't know everything and they want to get better, you know. So that's what's going to be fun. We'll take some lumps, but, you know, those are growing pains.
Mm-hmm.
Just preparing for something bigger.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. We'd like to have you back maybe mid-season.
Yeah, thank
At
you.
that
guys,
point,
you know.
at that point, we'll have a lot more to discuss about what's been happening with the team as opposed to now everything has just begun. But,
Thank you. It's my honor.
but yeah, we really appreciate you coming on to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Yep.